Welcome back to our book study. I'm Reverend David Matthews. Today we continue with our book, Hearing God by Dallas Willard, and we come to chapter 4, Our Communicating Cosmos. Elizabeth Baird Browning is quoted, "Earth's crammed with heaven, and every common bush afire with God, but only he who sees takes off his shoes." Dallas Willard in this chapter explores the idea of God speaking to us through nature and encouraging us to help us to understand the different ways in which we are biased against believing that God either wants to speak to us or should speak to us or could speak to us, and helping us to overcome those things. He talks about the limits of signs. He says, "It is important, however, to recognize that there is a limit to how much faith can grow by contemplating such stories. No matter how well attested they may be, no matter how reliable the minds and characters of the people involved. And this limit is not neglected in the teachings of the Bible itself." Dallas Willard recognizes that signs in the world around us are a big way in which God speaks to us. But there are limits to it. How do we interpret and understand those signs? How do we recognize that God is speaking to us through them? What is he trying to say to us? What is he trying to help us to know and believe? Within each sign, there's a story, an evidence to the existence of God. But what is that sign trying to say to you? He gives the situation of a woman whose son is sick with an ear infection, and she's prayed for him, but nothing has happened. And so along comes another preacher, somebody who doesn't believe necessarily in the same things she does about faith or about the scriptures. He prays for her. The boy is healed. What is God trying to say through this moment? Is the woman's faith incorrect in its theological basis? Is this man a righteous man of God? What is going on? Should she have had more faith to believe that God would heal? Should she have asked only once, knowing that the boy would have been healed anyway? What is the answer? So signs are wonderful. They let us know that God is present, but helping us to discern what God's will is through them can be tricky. At the end of the book, Dallas Willard quotes an individual who says when they believe God is speaking, they should ask for multiple signs, ways for God to affirm it again and again and again. Now, there is the scriptural example of this, of course, through Gideon and his fleece. But to continue to ask God to prove something again and again and again can also be understood as a lack of faith. I do encourage you, however, to seek affirmation at least through people you trust, people you can speak to about issues of faith and ask them their thoughts as well. Dallas Willard goes on to say that some people are hesitant because they believe that God would not communicate with run-of-the-mill human beings, that he does not communicate with them, that he cannot do so, or that God should not communicate with these individuals. Dallas Willard goes on to offer the following replies to these different aspects. One, that God would not. He says, no, God does, because he cares for us. God overcomes the barriers. It is not God is not so far off, and his grandeur is not made perfect or proven by the fact that he is reaching down to the lower people, to us mere mortals. God is not made less because he speaks to us or communes with us. Sometimes amongst people are considered to be great because they don't relate to the poor, to the broken, to mere people who are beneath them. And somehow that actually proves their value. God is not like that and has nothing to prove. That he does not communicate with them in any way. And Dallas Willard goes on to say God does. In fact, the more in tune we are with God, the more we can understand and sense and hear God. There are many different ways, he goes on to say, that God does speak to us. But one of the things we need to be is ready to listen to him. If we are not willing or able to accept what God might say to us, then there is no way for us to hear him. That God cannot do so. No, God has created the heavens and the earth and everything that is in, everything seen and unseen, we say in our Nicene Creed, God has created it all. And as God has created it all, he can speak through it to us. It's not a clockwork system that he himself cannot enter or share. 4, God should not communicate with us. No, he goes on to say God should communicate with us because he cares for us. Now that would be a very hard thing, is that God could not, or rather, God should not speak to us. And I struggle with this point because I don't understand it. I think it comes from a very different perspective, this idea of people arguing that God should not speak to us. He says, some people are motivated by the need to control the divine presence and word for what they sincerely regard as proper purposes. In other words, God should not relate to us because there's a good and right way that God should act and a good and right way we should act. And he just says recognizes that that's not how relationship works. Near the end of the chapter, he goes on to once again embrace Lectio Divina, or the reading of Scripture, and encourages us to embody the Scripture and experiencing it from different people's perspective. He uses the story of Elijah and Elisha and asks us to step into the situation and understand what we might have seen, what it would have been like to experience being in Elisha's shoes and watching Elijah going up to heaven in amongst chariots of fire. What would that have been like? Dallas Willard ends the chapter encouraging us to reflect upon what we have heard and to understand, as he says, as he is quoting, no man or woman is an island. He goes on to say, though we always remain much more than the sum of our relationships to others, even in the Christian community, our relationships to others, essential and helpful as they may be, must rest finally upon our personal reflections to God himself. When both relationships are right, we find perfect safety, and this is full of perfect peace. Oh, this transport all divine, in a love that cannot cease, I am his and he is mine. We are made for relationships. We are made in a world of relationships, but the primary relationship that we are made for is between us and the God of the heavens and the earth. We'll continue on our study looking at the questions, and there will be a link to that at the end of this video. God bless and have a great day. Bye-bye.